Welcome to Latinos Who Tech. My name is Hugo Castellanos. I'm an engineer and I work in Silicon Valley. I am originally from Caracas, Venezuela, and I've been calling the US home for the last 20 years. When it comes to Latinos in the US, we are 60 million people, but we're only 3% of the workers in science or engineering. As a professional in Silicon Valley, I've had the opportunity to meet some remarkable professionals that work in the tech industry, Latinos like me. With this podcast, I want to bring you a collection of their stories and how they got a job in tech in the first place. And if they had to start all over again, what would they do differently? I want to share with you career advice on how to get a job in tech, how to deal with imposter syndrome, how to find your tribe when you're the only one in the room. This is Latinos Who Tech. This episode of Latinos Who Tech is brought to you by Audible. Audible is the world's premium platform for audiobooks with over 150,000 titles. If you're like me, you're passionate about learning new things, but finding the time to read may be difficult. Audiobooks are a great alternative. You can get a free 30-day trial plus a free audiobook by going to audibletrial.com/Latinos. Go and support them since they support us. Thank you. Diego, welcome to Latinos Who Tech.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited for this conversation.
And we're going to be doing the English version today because previous one, we talked about that time that you met Warren Buffett and some investing advice and how you got into consulting. So I'm wondering if we can talk today about cybersecurity and how to get a career in it.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So just for the record, I've been doing cybersecurity for the past 6.5 years. And I typically work out of Chicago. That's technically where my office is at. But I'm currently staffing a few projects here in the Silicon Valley area. So it's a very interesting field, and I'm really excited to share some insights and some tips of how to get involved in that field.
Awesome. So maybe you can start by telling me your story. I mean, how do you get to cyber? How do you get to the US? I mean, how do you get here?
Definitely. So I was originally born in Caracas, Venezuela. And as some of you know, Caracas, Venezuela itself has been going through a lot of difficult times. So a lot of people left the country over the years. So I moved into Nebraska where I went to school, and, through my time in school, I'm a very curious person. I like learning about different things. At the beginning of my career or my college career, I basically wanted to do marketing. So I did an internship with Nike, which I realized that marketing wasn't for me. Then at some point, somebody told me about investment banking. So I was like, well, maybe I should do finance. So I went and did an internship in New York for a bank, and quickly realized that, it wasn't for me. And then slowly, after sort of finishing that internship, I kind of sat down and I said, okay, what are the things that I really like? Like, what is exactly, forget about money. What are the things that I enjoy doing myself? And I quickly drew down a few things, including soccer, right? Soccer, technology, all these things. And I started figuring out, okay, from these things, what are the things that I can realistically go into and actually enjoy doing on a day-to-day basis? And technology came across me as a way as something that I really enjoy dealing with. Like I'm the type of person who likes, playing on my phone or going on my computer, playing with IoT devices, like all these crazy things that I really like. So I felt it was a good field to go into. So from trying marketing, investment banking, sort of landed in this technology field, which is highly demanding because it's constantly changing, which is really what makes me excited about it. You have fields, without any disrespect, that are very stagnant, like accounting, for example. The rules are the rules, and at some point you learn them all and you pretty much apply what you know, and that's sort of what it is. Whereas, in cybersecurity or in technology, every day there's a new challenge and something that comes out that you have to learn. So it keeps it very exciting for me and for a lot of people in the field. And that's sort of what drew my attention into the field. So it's very exciting.
So maybe you can share with me a bit about cybersecurity and what is it anyway? Because when I hear cybersecurity, I picture this. I have this vision of leaks And and I feel like it's more frequent nowadays that every other week I see XYZ company, there's 400,000 records leaked of customers and their social security numbers and stuff like that. So but maybe you can share with me what's the day to day of somebody that works in your field.
I'll start with a quick example, right? If I tell you, can you think of what are the assets of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, for example? Most people can think of gold, right? You think of the physical gold; those are the assets. We got to protect them.
Yeah. We also Die Hard 3 at some point,
right? So most people think of physical things, but we're in a digital world where most of the assets are really digital, right? You have information that includes, social security numbers, credit card information, potentially information that involves patterns of customers, which are, protected by a company who put them together, or intellectual property rights. But anyways, those are really what we consider assets in terms of my field. And, when the internet was created, it basically opened a way for people to get unauthorized access of those assets, basically. And that's really when this field was born. Basically, in a pretty easy way to understand, or in a way to understand this, you got to think of a house, okay? Let's say you have a house, and inside that house, you have a bunch of papers that describe your life. It has your social security number. It has, all your credit card information, how many kids you have, all your healthcare information. Think about it like as a physical paper inside that house. Mm. And, in your house, you have one or maybe two doors to get in. You have a garage, you have windows, and the lower floor, maybe if you have two floors, you have windows also on the higher floor. And at some point you say, okay, how am I going to protect all these physical papers that I have here in my living room from somebody coming in and grabbing them and leaving? Like, what do I do? Financially speaking, you can't install a security guard on every window and every door, or you can't install cameras everywhere, or you can have a police department next to you. It's just not financially feasible, right? So you got to make a decision and say, well, I have two doors here and there. I have these windows that are, maybe one of them is closer to the street. So I want to strategically place a camera or an alarm or things in places where I think it's more likely that they're going to come in. And if they do, and I can detect somebody coming in, I want to basically have a way of responding to the attacker to make sure that either the person gets caught or maybe I reduce the amount of papers that I take away from my house. So that example is essentially what cybersecurity is. We essentially do this for companies. We help them protect their house in a way, and we help them build, either technologies, processes, mechanisms, ways of protecting their assets. So, that's sort of a good way of thinking about cybersecurity. You can't really protect everything, but you do have to strategically think of what are the ways that somebody can get a hold of your assets and how can you prevent that or detect that if it ever happens. So,
got it. No, thank you for that. So it's like, I love the fact that you mentioned the return of investment. So if it makes sense to protect, I have a safe in my house and I have my passport and I have my car deed there. I don't keep my receipt for my laptop there because I don't need it, right? So it's keep something that makes sense there, right? It's small, so you need to be strategic. What are you gonna pick? Does it make sense to protect anyway? So no, that's awesome.
Exactly.
But I'm wondering, because you work in the cyberspace and you are a consultant. So what do you go to school for?
Yeah, so that's an interesting fact about myself. So, I actually, when I went to school, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I did two majors. So I studied finance. That was kind of the main major. At the same time, because I was so passionate about technology, I also studied management information systems. Mm-hmm. So the great thing about management information systems, which in some schools they call it differently. For example, I've seen schools that call it business intelligence analytics. There's different names. But overall, what it is, it's basically a way for people to understand at a high level how technology works. What's an application? What's a database? What's an operating system? How does it talk to each other? Like all the basics, mm-hmm. and which gives you a pretty good segue into cybersecurity. Because in cybersecurity, the problem with there's a big problem with cybersecurity, which is that you need a number of skills to be successful. It's not just knowing programming. It's not just knowing how an application works. It's not just knowing what's an architecture. You kind of have to know a little bit about everything to really know what you're doing.
Got it. So a lot of our audience are, like young professionals or college students. So I'm wondering, like, what are those key skills, those key competencies that people need to build?
Yeah, I think obviously the most basic one is, programming, right? So there's a lot of programming languages out there, C, C++, Python, like you can name it. There's a lot of them out there. So having an understanding of how to do programming, how to configure something, that's a pretty basic thing that you need. You don't have to be an expert, especially when you start in this field, but you have to know at least the basics behind that. I think that's an important one to have. At the same time, you should also know a lot about architecture, right? It's not just knowing how to build an application and make it work. It's also understanding, where do you want to place the database so it's safe? How do you want that application to connect to the network so it sends data to other applications? All those things are important, because if you make a mistake when you're designing something and you don't understand the bigger picture, that's typically how hacks or hackers can get into your system and steal data. So it is a combination of programming language, understanding basically the architecture of technology, understanding a little bit about networking, right? Like how does data gets transmitted from point A to point B? Anything that involves dealing with data that is stored or transmitted through a network. Anything, whether it's programming or just understanding the concepts, I think are important for somebody who's trying to go into the cybersecurity space.
Got it. What is data warehousing?
Yeah. So, what you'll see is that initially you have something called a database, right? Let me start there so people understand. So a database, you start storing data. A lot of times it's historical, right? Based on the date that you change something and so forth. But with the need of storing larger amounts of data, at some point data warehouses were created, which is basically bigger databases with more processing capabilities, where you can look for things, look for patterns, so you can think of a database being like a smaller thing, or a thing where you can store data, a data warehouse being a bigger one where you can do multiple things, not just store data, but there's other capabilities. And now you have big data environments like Hadoop or some of the more, I guess, famous ones today, where you can only store data, but you can also run certain analytics to find patterns in that data. So we've kind of evolved from little things to this gigantic big data environment that now companies are using, and just creates a lot of challenges for our field, because now you have to worry about much more, right? Like if you have a big data environment, how do you know where your data is, right? Because the data could be in multiple places. How do you know that privacy is if you have to adhere to the privacy rules in Europe, how do you know that the data in the different nodes of the big data environment is protected? Like sometimes you don't know.
Right.
So it's been becoming more complex over time, and it's a challenge, and sometimes it's also exciting because it creates other opportunities for people.
Yeah, and because there's this whole technology stack of different not only applications but also services and companies that play in this space. And actually, I have a friend, he's a mentor too. He from Cloudera, and he was trying to explain to me this analogy of what's the difference between big data and, what I have in my hard drive kind of thing. So it's like, Hugo, imagine that, you have a storage. Imagine you have a receipt in your wallet and you're storing it. You're storing data in your wallet. But then the next level, do like a data warehouse. That's your Quicken budget in your computer with all the receipts and all the expenses that you have. Now, if you go somewhere like Hadoop, like a big data environment, I can run a query on all your stored data and figure out how old you are, if you're going to buy a car in the next 6 months or not, and maybe who you vote for.
Exactly.
Depending on your spending patterns, so it's like, how do you make those models, like the power of big data, which is something that, it goes beyond just being a large quantity of numbers. Is having a large quantity of data and also being able to run queries on it, actually, manipulate the data.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of being able to access patterns on the data faster than just going into a database and running a bunch of algorithms or queries. So yeah, it has changed the landscape for a lot of companies. They can quickly now make decisions. You'll see any major company today has a big data environment, and you're totally right. I mean, it is very important, and they can basically figure out a lot of things about customer behavior by looking at patterns and their big data environments.
Yeah, there's that story of Target that they can figure out, depending on what you buy, if you're pregnant or not.
Yes,
And that they'll target people's mailers, so the thing they get in the mail with coupons. And it's happened that that somebody, this guy opens the mail and is like, wait, what am I getting stuff for diapers? And honey, do we have to talk?
Yes, no. And to give you an example, this obviously doesn't fall necessarily on the cybersecurity space, but it is something that we are aware of. Companies today, for example, Walmart, they're pretty good at analyzing this data. And if you go to a Walmart store and you walk in, based on the credit card information that people are spending, they've realized that people between 22 and 28, kind of that range, has spent, typically go and buy beer and milk and diapers. Typically, these are people that recently got married, they have young kids, right? So based on this data, basically what Walmart has done is that they actually now place the beer, the diapers, and the milk really far away from each other in their stores, because they know that, one, these people are young professionals who just started. Two, they know that by placing these items far away from each other, the person will walk longer, and there's a chance that as they walk longer to grab the diapers and the beer, even though it's a weird relationship, they'll grab more products. However, how do you know that people buy beer and diapers? There's no way you would know that unless you study the data. That's what the data was telling them. So there are easy ways of us, without looking at the data, making associations like, well, if somebody buys X, most likely they're going to buy cheese. So let's place the X and the cheese separately. We kind of know that, right?
Yeah.
Let's make that assumption. But unless you study big data environments, you wouldn't know that when people buy beer, they're very likely to buy diapers, because these are, again, the 22 to 28 young professionals. So that's why it's so important, because it can really change decisions and ways that you do things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not obvious.
And I wonder what places like Safeway or Walmart know about me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because they give you that membership card, right? And that membership card is to give you points, right? It was only to give you points and give you that 0.1% discount and stuff. So it's not to gather your data at all, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's how they figure out, it's like, and it's not to sound like okay, there's no like a tinfoil hat here. It's not. I'm not talking about that, but it's a tool, right? It's that's the heart of it. I mean, we're in business and we aim to make money.
Exactly. No, and it's also helpful, right? Like, I mean, you also want companies to understand what are the things you're looking for, so they can also change their behavior, so the products they're selling. If they're seeing, for example, that today people are buying more organics products, maybe that's something that they need to consider. Maybe they need to start buying more or selling more organic products in their stores, right? So it also helps companies change the things that they do or the things that they sell, because they're seeing patterns on certain people buying certain things. So it also helps. I mean, I'll be happy if companies, or in this case, grocery stores, sell more organic products. But it's just, you can only see these things if you look at data.
Right. It's like there was this big thing about the keto diet over 2018, 2019. So this like a low carb, high fat, moderate protein thing. And now I go to Safeway and I see keto snacks or like keto certified stuff. I'm like, whoa, okay, that took a while to close the loop. No, was awesome. But back to cybersecurity though. So key competencies, you mentioned programming, you mentioned, being familiar with big data, like manipulating stuff. What about soft skills?
Yeah, no,
I'm wondering, like, how does that fall, like, in cybersecurity? Because I have this vision of a bunch of people coding, these like white hat hackers trying to break into stuff, but it's more than that, right?
It's definitely more than that. So you certainly need the people that are sitting in the room, facing their computers, looking for patterns in the data. You need those people, right, to deal with a potential attack, right? How do you detect these attacks? You need people sitting and looking at these things, or people who do understand AI or artificial intelligence and can create algorithms to find these things and all of that. But you also need soft skills, because, at the end of the day, companies, for example, in my area of cybersecurity, I do cybersecurity strategy. So I'm not so much focused on verticals of cybersecurity. Like, I'm not the person that's sitting on a computer monitoring for threats. I'm not the person that it's detecting a threat and it's starting a communication channel or opening an incident. I'm the person who comes into a company and actually helps you create a strategy. Like, You need to have a cybersecurity program. You need to have a cybersecurity awareness campaign. You need to have detection tools. And, companies typically have a limited budget. A company can say, hey, look, this year we just want to spend $1 million in anything that has to do with information technology. Where can we spend our money? And that's when I come in. That's when I say, look, these are the 10 things that people in your industry are doing. You only have this amount of money. Maybe you should consider investing in these 5, because those are the ones that are going to give you the biggest ROI. Whether it's protecting your data better, whether it's finding better patterns in the data, making better decisions, and so forth. So I'm more on the strategy side, where I look at everything horizontally. But there are these verticals that you can specialize on that are also very important, and we need them because that's really how our field works. So it's interesting. Just from any angle you look at it, there's always something you can do. But in terms of soft skills, just to answer your question, you need people that are the most important thing you need in cybersecurity are having the ability to solve problems. That's really, and I don't know if that's technically a soft skill, but I consider it to be a soft skill, because you don't always have the answer. It's not like a virus, there's something called 0-day vulnerability, things that you're being faced with for the first time, and you have to make decisions quickly on the spot. So having a way in your brain to make decisions on the spot based on things that you're seeing, that's one of the most important skills. You can be the best programmer in the world. You can be the best person at, following up with things, but you have to know how to put everything together and how to create, a plan that works for a company. So, I think to me, that's one of the most important skills, being able to solve problems on the spot, So how do you prepare yourself for that? Well, you go through.
You do a lot of problems, and you solve a lot of puzzles. So it's like people love to hate on video games because you're wasting your time, and I'm like, they help me think faster, because I have to make decisions quickly, hand-eye coordination, all that stuff. Things like taking care of yourself, like working out.
Exactly.
Everything that you can do to keep this thing inside your head healthy, that's a fair game, I think.
No, exactly. And, more in the cyberspace, a good example of how to prepare for these type of things are labs, right? So there are a lot of schools that have cybersecurity labs where you go through scenarios, right? They'll throw at you like different scenarios of an attack, and then you have to be on the spot making decisions. These are things that you maybe it's the first time you're seeing them. They're fake, but at the same time, it could happen to you in the real world. So the best way to be good at solving problems in our space is to potentially be trained in one of these labs, right? And figuring out, okay, I'm being attacked. I'm seeing this pattern, these servers. Maybe I should shut down half of the company and operate on the other half of the servers. So the best way of solving problems is basically going into labs and actually seeing things in a test scenario or a sandbox environment type of thing. But, it's a skill that takes some time to develop, so it's not going to happen overnight.
No, definitely. And I see that going to the lab and running tests on attacks and actually simulating attacks, I see that as going to the gym, if you will. Like you're preparing for when you really have to do the thing. Any projects that you're proud of, things that you can share with us, obviously, nothing confidential, but I'm curious to hear maybe like a project that you delivered you're proud of, or maybe a particular cyber attack you found really enlightening, like anything you can share on that.
Yeah. So, obviously without giving any names, I've been doing a lot of work here in Silicon Valley, but I think one of the one of the best examples of a good project that I had that I think I always kind of give as an example is a project that I had with a pretty well-known institution in the United States, where essentially they were on staff. They had no budget to deal with these things. They have no technology, but they had a lot of sensitive information. They have a lot of intellectual property, a lot of research, a lot of things that, if not protected, basically could bring this institution down, right? You could take out their name, their business, everything. So with a limited budget and with all the constraints that we had, we basically sat down with the CIO and the CISO, right? We worked with them for about 4 months, trying to come up with a way of making their institution safer with the limited things that they had. And it was very, very, very actually rewarding because after the 3 months, we basically put together this, we call it the 5-year roadmap. We said, look, we know you're limited in money. We know you're limited in resources. But if you follow this 5-year program, this is where you're going to be in 5 years, right? So obviously this happened a while ago. And, after 5 years, we kind of look back and say, did it work? Was our advice accurate? And we realized that if they would have not done the things we told them to do in those 5 years, which they did, by the way, they would have basically be out of business because there were things that happened in those 5 years that exactly affected the areas that we told them to fix. And if they literally would have not followed our advice, this major United States institution will not exist today the way it is. So, I mean, again, it's hard to explain what we went through to come up with that plan. A lot of estimates, a lot of things based on data, but it makes you feel that you were able to protect a very large institution with a lot of data that otherwise would not exist today. And it would be a major chaos for the US. So I think that's one of the best examples that I have in terms of my career, something rewarding that I can give you. I wish I could give you the name.
No, of course, no worries.
Yeah.
Are there any, so at least, so every profession has their go-to story. Like I'm sure that every profession has their Titanic, like their biggest disaster that everybody knows, their cautionary tale that, maybe if we build this ship, maybe we should have enough lifeboats. Are there any Titanics in the industry that you can, famous, that not your customers, that maybe you can go deeper in detail?
In terms of like catastrophes, like things that happened that we just went wrong, or just in terms of
cyber attacks that, like maybe people can relate?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest threats that I think I faced with some of my clients was back in 2013, like right when I was kind of beginning my career. During that year, there was something that was kind of famous called, I don't know if you heard of this, but it was called the crypto locker. It was a really famous virus. Basically, what this virus would do was that it would basically go and encrypt your hard drive, and it's actually known as a ransomware. So for people who don't know this, if you think of a malware, ransomwares are kind of the new kid on the block. These are things that are essentially sort of new in the cyberspace. It's not something that has been around for too long. And what it does basically is that it goes into your computer, it encrypts your data, and it essentially holds your files hostage, meaning that you have your computer physically with you, but you don't have any access to your files unless you pay the hacker an amount of money, whatever he wants. Maybe it's $300, maybe it's $5,000, depending on what data he got a hold of. So these ransomwares were, for a while, and I think even today it's still a big threat, but they were basically getting a hold of data from small to medium-sized companies, and they were basically demanding, $50,000. If you don't give me $50,000, we will basically delete the data or throw away the encryption key and take you out of business. Luckily for a lot of companies, they had backups of the data. So they said, you know what, you can do whatever you want with that. But at the end of the day, I can go back and look at my backups and I'm fine. However, there were some companies who did not potentially do it or do backups when they needed to, and they were affected because they had to pay money. And this crypto locker virus, the guy who created it, which at the end, I think this specific one, he was caught. He would have made money in Bitcoin because they couldn't trace it and all that stuff. But he made like $30 million like in a year, just basically doing this type of stuff to companies. He would just go scare people that work for companies and demand money. So I saw a few of my clients affected by this. I saw a lot of peers, who dealt with clients that were going through this. But luckily, at least the crypto locker one no longer exists. But there's similar ones out there today that people are trying to defend themselves from.
So I must ask this because, okay, great. You have a backup. Hopefully it's air gapped, so it's not connected to the internet at all. And but how does the regular listener protect themselves? Again, we all hear those regular IT advice that, hey, change your password every 2 months or stuff like that. But what can we really do, to stay safe?
No, that's a good question. So the first thing I would do, I would define the 3 major types of attacks that you can get. First, if you understand that, then you understand how do you protect yourself. So I think The biggest type of attack that most people get are what's called phishing, right? Phishing. So phishing is basically a type of social engineering attack where somebody creates an email or a website that is not a real website, right? You get an email from Apple saying, oh, by the way, it's been 90 days, your password must be changed. Come in here into this website that looks exactly like Apple's website, put your username and password, and it's going to be automatically changed. This is literally a way for hackers to have your username and credentials. And as soon as you enter that data, they will use that data to go into your actual Apple account, change your username and password, and then use that to their advantage, whether it's buying things or stealing things from you. But these types of attacks are in the rise. A lot of people, older people especially, get emails with something that looks exactly like their bank. It's literally an email that says, it's Citibank, we've lost your password, please come in, or it's been 90 days, there might be some fraud in your account, come in and log in. And, if you're not skeptical, you really will fall for these things. And anybody can fall for these things, by the way. Even us could potentially think it's actually our bank and click on something, and which will automatically compromise your system. How do you protect yourself from these things? It's very easy, actually. A lot of times when a hacker creates, let's say, a fake website or a fake email, typically what you can do is you can check when you get an email, it says to and from. Typically the from email will have a, apple.com or whatever, it will have an actual email. What hackers typically do is they misspell a word. It looks almost exactly the same, but there's always something that's different. And usually, for the most part, most hackers don't care, but it's pretty obvious if you don't see Apple, but you see Apple with a D and Apple, it's not Apple. So the first way to protect yourself is always check the sender, who sent you the email, and whether that ID looks real or not. If you have a suspicion that the ID is not real, but you still want to kind of you don't want to click on it, but you still want to make sure that maybe you might need to change your password, you can always contact the company directly, and they would actually usually tell you, like, yeah, we didn't send you any emails, or usually a bank will know if something really happened. But I would say always check the sender ID, like where did it come from, look for any typos. And then if you're still not comfortable with that, if you feel like, well, I'm still not sure, just call the company directly.
Got it.
That's the most common attack that we see. And, it happens, it can affect anybody. We all get emails, we all get things that we click on.
We all get that IRS phone call, the March time frame that you owe $10,000. Give us the money now, or we'll go to your house, arrest you.
Exactly.
And it's really sad, man, that people take advantage of seniors, especially people and also, recent immigrants too. People that don't know their rights and how things work. Like the IRS will only contact you via a snail mail.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Exactly. No, yeah. And, the ones you're talking about is called smishing. It's when you get a call from somebody and they pretend to be, oh, we're your bank, give you this. Those are also on the rise. So you do have to know and make sure that you don't give anybody any information unless you know for sure it's your bank or it's, Apple or whichever company you're dealing with.
Got it.
And those are the most typical ones.
You mentioned there were three?
I was going to say the three main ones. Obviously, there's a lot. But yeah, so that's what I call phishing / social engineering, right? Those are the ones where somebody pretends to be someone who they're not. You fall for their trap. You give them your credentials. You give them your credit card, your social security number, and then they use that to, do different kinds of fraud. The second big one that you will see sort of in our field is what we call malware attacks, right? So for malware attacks, there's a lot of examples like the one I gave you, CryptoLocker, right? Which was basically a ransomware type. But there's a lot of different types. You have spyware, you have different things. But what it is basically malicious code that gets injected in your computer to do things that you don't want your computer to do. For example, it could send data to somebody about, your credentials for your bank, or it could send your files to somebody. It could do something that will potentially harm your computer. It could also shut it down. A good example of malware that we're seeing today in the year 2020 is that you see a lot of people, including younger people that are very tech savvy, they think that if you go to the App Store, or they think if you go to, any of these stores that you can download apps, they think every single app out there is safe. And the answer is it's not true, right? You can go into the App Store, and if you download an app that came from a shady developer, there is a chance that app can come with malicious malware that could potentially compromise your phone. And you don't realize it because you think, oh, it's in the App Store, it must be safe. It probably went through, security checks.
Right.
It's not always the case. So you could be downloading an app, again, that has malware that will potentially, compromise your phone or send data to a third party that you don't want that data to go to. And I know what you're probably thinking. You're like, okay, how do I protect myself from these things? It's actually easier than you think. I would say there's three ways you can protect yourself as well. Number one, make sure that you always have the latest patch on your phone. If we're iOS 13 or whatever the one we are today, make sure that you are up to date with that, because the reason why we have different patches on your phone is because they found flaws that can be exploited. So the number one way to protect yourself from these things is always patch your phone with the latest thing that gets released, or your computer, or whatever technology, or your IoT device. That's number one way to protect yourself. Number two, always download apps from trusted developers. There's websites out there that you can check to see who they are, whether they're popular or not. You can also check the reviews, right? If you see an app,
I was gonna say, like, it's almost an impulse. The first thing I do when I'm gonna download an app just to try it out, I always read the reviews and I make sure that the developer looks legit.
Exactly.
In the sense that it's not again, the reviews will tell you usually like 9 times out of 10, and if it doesn't have any reviews, I don't touch it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's a good sign, right? So if you see an app that has 1 review or 5 reviews, I would, unless you absolutely need it, I wouldn't download the app, because there's a chance that it was developed with, it wasn't following the leading developing practices like SDLC and all that stuff. So yeah, check reviews, check who's the developer, make sure your phone is up to date with the latest patch, make sure your computer is up to date with the latest software update. Those are things you can do to protect yourself. There's always a chance that you can still have the latest, patch in your phone, and you download an app that happens to have a 0-day attack, meaning that it hasn't been discovered. That can always happen.
Say that again. How do you say that?
It's called a 0-day attack.
0-day. Oh, okay. Like a patient zero kind of thing. Like, it's just
exactly.
This is the first time we see this virus. Okay,
exactly.
Gotcha.
And that could happen, right? Because obviously there's a lot of 0-day attacks, things that we've never seen. And that's actually why we continue to patch things, right? Because you'll find these things. You're like, okay, here's this type of attack. Let's go ahead and the next version we'll make sure that this flaw has been fixed.
It's funny because I find that very scary, but also very exciting at the same time. It's like, man, it's a virus nobody has ever seen before.
Exactly. And it happens every day. There's 0-day attacks every day. And every day we learn something new in our field, and we try to make sure that we fix it. I know we don't care about dates in this podcast, in this week, there's a recent article that came out talking about Jeff Bezos' phone being hacked. They hired a consulting firm. They kind of looked into the phone, they did some forensics, and they realized that it was actually related to a WhatsApp conversation that he had with the Saudi Arabia prince. And like, there was a video that they exchanged, and there's a chance that the video had some malware code in the video that was essentially sending data from Jeff Bezos' phone to that third party or that hacker. They're still investigating, because part of the problem was that the data in WhatsApp is actually encrypted. But it just tells you, if Jeff Bezos' phone can be compromised, anyone's phones can be compromised, right? So you're not safe from these things. You do have to take precautions to make sure you're not caught off guard.
I mean, if Zuckerberg has some tape on his webcam, I have some tape on my webcam as well.
It's true. And about a month ago, there were reports of people saying that their security cameras at home were compromised. There was a video. I don't know if you saw this, but there was a girl in a room, and that somebody from the internet was talking through the camera to the girl, and this video actually became viral. So anything can be hacked. IoT devices, typically people who buy them, they don't understand technology. They just want to have a camera in their home.
Yeah, and I show you the numbers, right? Like, some people listen to this on their Alexa.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Maybe you are listening to this on your Alexa right now. So that's interesting to me. Like, podcasting is headphones and a walk kind of thing. But hey, if you're cooking and listening on Alexa, more power to you, right?
Exactly. No, so again, those are ways you can protect yourself. But those are I would say, when it comes to social engineering, which includes phishing or smishing, which is phishing is more on the email, physical or virtual thing, versus smishing is when you get phone calls. Those are very typical ones that people fall for. Then you have the malware type, which are, again, there's different types, but that's also a very common one. But there's other ones. There's a physical security attack where somebody pretends and goes into a facility, tailgating somebody. There's other ways. And there's other more sophisticated ways of getting into systems. But I would say for the most part, the majority of viruses and things you see out there can probably fall in one of those two categories.
Got it. That's awesome. That's awesome. I saw this thing that some security companies like McAfee or what have you, they will hire actors to play out social engineering scenarios to train their employees. So to actually walk them to, okay, so when somebody talks to you this way, or be aware, like they're trying to get some information out of you. They're trying to maybe get some code, some information that they shouldn't have. So
yeah, and that's something that we actually advise companies to do, right? So we have a good cybersecurity program should have a cyber awareness campaign. And typically what that means is essentially teaching people about these ways that people can get hacked. And in some cases, you might want to even test it, see if people actually fall for it. So sometimes companies internally, they will send fake emails with fake links.
Yep.
And if you click on them, it will tell you fell for this phishing campaign. Please retake this training. And it's a pretty annoying process for people, but it's a way for you to learn these things, right?
Yeah. And in my case, I fell for one of those, and it was pretty impressive how they did it. They actually misspelled my manager's name. They made it look like an email from my manager.
And that's what a real hacker would do.
And I'm like, oh yeah, it's like, click. You've been assigned this cybersecurity training for 2 hours. I'm like, oh my God, I fell for it.
It's exactly. And it's pretty easy.
But it worked, right? Like that happened only once. So.
Yeah, it's, again, all it takes is one email that you click on something and it compromises your entire system. I mean, you have to really know what you're doing. And sometimes you're tired. You just, okay, I'm going to click on this. And, just like that, you can compromise your entire company. That's why it's so risky. I felt really bad because we do a lot of these campaigns as well. And one test that we do is that we actually go into a company physically, we tailgate behind somebody, and we drop flash drives that had SQL injections, right? So you have all this, like, for example, you drop a flash drive in the kitchen, right? And typically you have a good Samaritan that goes into the kitchen. And it's like, oh, look, somebody dropped a flash drive. Let me go into my computer and plug it in to see if I can find the owner and actually give it to that person.
Oh my gosh.
When they plug it in, to be nice, it's an actual, obviously it's us, so we're trying to train people, but you shouldn't just plug in a USB that you find on the floor into your computer. By no means, because a hacker could literally do that. They could drop it in the main door of a building before you walk in, and just to make it look like somebody dropped it. And that's exactly how they get into your system. If you study a pretty well-known virus called Stuxnet, Stuxnet, basically through flash drives, that's how they were able to get into an Iran nuclear plant and basically shut it down. Literally, nuclear plants are air gapped. They don't actually connected to the internet, but it doesn't mean it's still subject to human error, right? Somebody grabbing a flash drive and bringing it in and doing certain things. So it is another technique that a hacker could use to basically get into your environment. Even if you think you're protected from the internet, right? You can still have a good Samaritan plug in something and get your entire network compromised. That's how much it takes.
Yeah. So if you see a USB drive on the floor, pick it up, but put it on the lost and found. Don't plug it into your computer. I mean, it looks.
Yeah, I would say bring it to the IT help desk. Typically, what they would do, a good practice, is plug it into a computer that it's basically a sandbox environment, not connected to the internet, and they can see whether it's safe or not. And they will be the ones who can basically give it to the person. If it's a true USB that somebody dropped, they can give it to that person. Or if it's a virus, they can basically figure out who it was, and they can do all the forensics that they need to do.
Right. But if it's a USB drive that looks weird and it has a little note that says, give it to the CEO, don't trust it. Don't trust it. Just let it go. Exactly. Give it to the IT guys. And it's funny because we were talking before starting recording, we were talking about TikTok and the other things that, the fact that you don't know where that data is hosted. You don't know. Legally, guess what? There's no laws. It's China. I mean, who knows what they're doing with that data? And a lot of people don't know that TikTok is a Chinese enterprise, right? That it's So I think there's actually a class action lawsuit happening right now here in California because a student from, I believe, San Diego, and again, please don't send me hate mail if I get this wrong, but there's a class action lawsuit because she was trying out the app, and you know how there's like a drafts function in your email that you can draft something but not send it out? She drafted a couple of TikTok videos and she didn't publish them, and she actually deleted the app. And then some months later, she opened it again, and then she went in and her stuff had been posted. So it's like, wait, I don't control this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a class action lawsuit, and again, there's even a bill in Congress, right? A project to look into it and actually ban it from U.S. government personnel devices, because again, it's dangerous, right? You don't know where that data is going.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. And luckily a lot of governments are basically aware of these situations, and there's been a lot of improvements, especially in Europe with privacy, right? They created the GDPR laws, which essentially is a set of laws that protect consumers from getting their data, right? If there's a that set of laws or principles says that if somebody stores your data in Europe and you want that data to be deleted, they actually have to go in and delete it. So there's things that protect the consumer, which is very important.
And also, if you request a copy of your data, they have to give it to you.
They have to give it to you.
So,
exactly.
so if I request a copy, hey, Zuckerberg, I want a copy of my Facebook, and then I want you to delete it. Okay, you have to comply. You have to give them everything.
And it's all thanks to all these laws that are coming out that, if companies don't follow these laws, there's significant fines, right, for these things. And now in California, there's a new one that's called the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Product Privacy Act. And, it's fairly new, it's being established over the past few years now. But, we're starting to see more and more governments at the federal level or even at the state level create some sort of privacy rules to make sure companies are, doing the right thing. So TikTok, it's a great example of exactly an app that I wouldn't personally use because, they don't adhere to any of these laws. It's all out of China where, there's basically no privacy. So that's why you need to be very careful where you decide to store your data. It's a very important thing. So.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to the power of personal choice. If you decide to use a XYZ app, it's your call. But at least be aware that these things happen, so you don't get taken advantage of because of something that you did haphazardly. Clicking on something you shouldn't, downloading something you shouldn't. So keeping that in mind, I'm wondering, if we can touch a little bit on the, how do you learn these things? Because I find that there's this perspective that, okay, I'm going to go for college and to study computer science. Oh, but wait, maybe I just need to get some certifications on this. So how do you navigate that? Like that, getting a master's degree on cybersecurity or getting some certifications on that?
That's a great question. And, I do a lot of conferences in different universities, Notre Dame, Creighton University and so forth. And that's typically the question I get from students, like, how do I do it? Should I go for a master's and specialize in cybersecurity? Should I get certifications? Should I just buy a book and read things on my own? Mm-hmm. I think it's a combination of all of them. I don't think there's a right solution for everybody. Everybody has a different way of learning. I mentioned the labs because I think those are great ways for people to get exposed to these things in a test environment, and you're able to basically learn how to react to these things. I think that's a great way for people who want to be more on the detection side of cybersecurity. But in terms of general, maybe even the area that I'm on, which is more on the strategy side, I would say certifications are a great way of getting a lot of the main knowledge that you need, because with certifications, number one, they're typically pretty broad, meaning that you can learn a little bit about every domain. You can learn about, how to look at cybersecurity from a governance perspective. Who's the CISO? What is the CISO should be doing? How to look at cybersecurity from a technology perspective. But what are the things that I need to have in place to make sure my data remains confidential, to make sure that I maintain my integrity, availability, all the basics of that. And the third thing I would say is that a good certification also gives you credibility in the market, right? So when you read a book on your own, typically there's not a good way for you to prove that you read the book or you have the knowledge. But having that certification on your name shows that you basically pass the exam, which shows that you have the knowledge.
Is there one that everybody should get, or like an entry-level one?
So there is one that I actually personally have myself that, in fact, there are some jobs in the cybersecurity space, they don't let you into the job unless you have the certification. So it actually opens the door for a lot of these jobs, which is called the CISSP. CISSP.
Got it.
Certified Information Systems Security Professional. And what it is, it gives you a pretty ground. It's not super deep or technical. There's a lot of technical stuff in this certification. I believe there's about 12 domains. I can't remember the exact number of domains, but in order for you to get certified, you have to pass each domain of the exam. So if you basically pass all domains except for one, you do not get certified. So that's what makes it so hard to get. A lot of people, don't pass these exams the first time, and it happens very often. But when somebody has a certification, they've excelled in each of the domains. So network security, application security, governance. So that's why it's so important to have this certificate. That's the one one of the ones I have. I actually have 3. And that's one of the ones that, like I said, a job will specifically say you should have, the CISSP.
Yeah. Is this something that like somebody can get while they're in college? Is this something that okay?
So let me clarify this, because the CISSP, besides passing the exam, they also require years of experience. However, the organization that provides this certification, called ISC Squared, have come up with, I think it's called the Associate CISP or something like that, where you can basically take it while you're in college and you still get sort of the associate title of the CISP. So there's ways you can still pass the exam. You might not get the title, the certification. You might get that maybe after a couple of years of work experience. But there's definitely ways for you to get up to the level where once you graduate, you at least have the associate title of the certification. And then after the 2 years of experience, then you get the actual title of the certification. There's another one that kind of competes with the CISSP called the CISM, the Certified Information Systems Manager or Information Security Manager, I believe. It's provided by a different organization called ISACA. It's sort of similar. A lot of organizations look into the CISP or the CISM. They're kind of at the same level. So it's also another one that people, I don't personally have that one, but it's another one that I know a lot of my peers have and have used for their jobs. There's a lot of them. There's one called Certified Ethical Hacker, right? That's typically a little bit more technical.
Let's double down on that a little bit, because no, thank you for sharing that. But I'm wondering, like, ethical hacking. A lot of us saw Mr. Robot. Do you see Mr. Robot?
Yes, I've seen it.
Gotcha. What do you think of Mr. Robot?
It's a great show. Not everything they say is factual, but it is a great show, and they do say a lot of things that it could happen to people. So
yeah, I just love the social engineering aspect of things, and like the fact that let's find out who this person is. Oh, they're married and their wife is pregnant. Okay, I'm gonna pretend that there's an emergency phone call that she's in labor now. Yeah. I just love that social engineering aspect of it. Wow. Yeah, so
it's amazing.
But that's the dark side. How about the ethical hacking side? What is that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so Certified Ethical Hacker certification, it's basically a certification that gives you the basics of how to hack a system, but it does it with the intent that you'll use it for a good cause, right? There's something called the white hat hackers and the black hat hackers, right? So the white hat people are the good people. They're basically there to protect companies. They're sort of policing your information security assets. And then you have the black hat hacker, which is somebody who's in the dark web, trying to steal your identity, trying to do all these things. So, in terms of ethical hacker, you always need, it's like a country. You always need policemen, and you're always going to have thieves, but you always need somebody to protect yourself. So that's what ethical hacking is. You need people who pretend to be the bad guys, and they attempt to enter your company. So if I'm a white hat hacker, what I would do is I'll say, hey, look, you'll pay me, let's say $10. I'm going to basically try to hack your company. And if I do, then I'll show you how I did it. In that way, you can protect yourselves from that specific area. And when a real bad person comes, they wouldn't be able to get in because they might actually follow what I just did. Mm-hmm. So ethical hacking is essentially helping companies basically practice with people that are good before a real bad person comes in and tries to steal their data. And it is important. We need it. We need people who have the capabilities and the skills, but they use them for a good reason or a good purpose. That's what it is. And that's why you have this certification. That's why you have people that do this for a living. It's actually called penetration testing. They actually try to go in and hack different things. There's something called the bug bounty program. If you find a flaw and you report this to, let's say, companies like Apple and so forth, they might actually pay you money because you found something in their systems. And I think Apple said recently that in their latest operating system, they'll pay somebody $1 million if they can hack it. So now you have all these people just trying to go in and see if they can. And if they can, they'll get paid. A lot of people actually have made millions of dollars just doing this for a living. There's a guy who's, I think 25, there was an article about him. He's worth, I think, $40 million because all he does is this. This is what he does for a living. He goes into companies like Apple, shows them how he hacked a specific product, and then helps them basically fix it. There's red teams, purple teams, blue teams. It gets very fun and very complicated.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great. No, thank you so much, Diego. So I think we covered, the careers, how you get into cybersecurity, certifications, attacks, how to stay safe. I'm wondering if we can move to practical wisdom and maybe that time that you got to have dinner with Warren Buffett. What's the best advice that they've given you? It can be career oriented, can be more like personal oriented, but what's the best career advice that you've gotten so far in your journey?
Yeah, I think I would say there's been a couple of things that I've received through my life that I kind of changed the way I look at things. I would say number one is if you're sitting in a room and you are the smartest person in the room, you're basically in the wrong place. That's one of the best things that somebody has ever told me. And I take that very seriously because what I've seen, at least myself through my experience, is that when I'm learning the most is typically when I'm in an environment where everybody else around me is smarter than me, basically. That's the way I can push myself across my limits. That's the way I can really learn things that I wasn't expecting to learn. Whereas I've also been in situations where maybe I'm the most senior person in the room, maybe I'm the person that knows the most, and I find myself basically stuck. I feel like I'm not growing. So with that advice in mind, through my career and doing cybersecurity for my firm, I basically always try to put myself in situations where I'm not the smartest person in the room. So that's actually the reason why I came to Silicon Valley. I felt that the clients I was helping before, I got to a point where I felt I don't want to say this, but I felt I was very comfortable. I felt I knew everything at that point. But I've realized that, at least in Silicon Valley, for my space, there's a lot of things that are up and coming. You have new technologies, you have artificial intelligence, blockchain, you have all these things that are fairly new. So I wanted to put myself in this position. I wanted to be exposed to the latest and greatest things out there. So basically I can be ahead of the curve. So that, to me, that's the best advice I can give somebody. Always put yourself in a company, in a work environment, even with your friends. Always try to make sure you surround yourself with people that know more than you, either in a technical subject, social, whatever you want to call it. That, to me, that's probably the best thing I could give people. I think your other question was about, you asked me about what's the best advice and then just conventional wisdom in terms of...
Yeah, no, you answered it perfectly. I think that, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? That's the motto that a lot of people used to live by. And guess what? It works. It works. That's why I'm a huge fan of rotational programs. Some companies, I was actually part of one at my current job. And a lot of companies have this idea of, guess what? This millennial generation, Gen Z, they have this idea that, hey, they get bored really easily. And that's not true. It's more about they actually, and I'll include myself there, is that we need to be constantly learning something and be engaged in order to deliver value. So we actually need to be, as you mentioned, uncomfortable, learning new stuff. And we need to know why we're doing it. So I'll give you an example. If somebody asks me that, hey, Hugo, I need you to go through this list of 250 customers and call every single one of them to confirm their address. And I'm going to look at you like you have 5 eyes in your face. I was like, wait, why is this for? Essentially, it's not that I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying, I just want to know, hey, what's the ultimate goal? Maybe I can figure out a way of doing this faster. Maybe I can write a script that pulls out data from Intellius and just grabs the stuff.
Exactly.
So again, so rotational programs are a huge thing now, and I love it because they give you an idea to learn from a different part of the business every 6 months or 9 months. I have a mentee, shout out to Joel. He's actually in a rotation program at GE, and he gets to move not only different business units but also different places. So he's been in Boston, he's been in New Orleans. I'm trying to convince him to come out here to California, but again, that's where he wants us to stay. So it's essentially like an opportunity. So just embrace it. Embrace change. It's not going anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, and somebody actually gave me a good example of how to understand this concept of always being yourself, surround yourself with people that are better than you. But somebody said, if you go into a race, right? Let's say you're in a track race, running in a circles, and you're basically running against people that are slower than you will always win. That's probably true, right? They're slower than you. You're gonna run and you're gonna swing. But if you go into this exact same race, but you're running against people that are faster than you might not win the race, but your time will be better. And what's more important, winning the race or making sure that you can run the fastest you can? It depends on what the outcome is. But if you over time, that person who's running against people that are faster than them is going to make himself or herself run faster, and their time will be better. And at some point, when they run against normal people, maybe they're always going to win. So that concept you can apply to business. Always run yourself with people that can run faster than you, so you can learn from them. And the other thing I would say is, if you are not breaking things, you're not running fast enough, right? So if you're not making mistakes, it means that you're probably not in an area that is uncomfortable to you. You're probably too comfortable, and that's why you're not making mistakes. So making mistakes is totally okay, and that's a good indication that you're in a place where you're still learning things, because it means that you don't know everything, right? So to me, that's the core concept of my life, right? That's how I strategically think about my career. Where am I going to place myself in the next few years? I think I mentioned to you this before we started this podcast. I'm currently studying for a cloud security certification, right? That I came across because I feel that the cloud security space is growing significantly, and I feel that I'm falling behind. So, you always want to make sure you're challenging yourself. And one of the reasons why I'm studying for this is because I have a lot of peers that have it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to be the only one who doesn't have it. I want to be at their level. But if I was in a company or in a situation where nobody cares and nobody has these things, I might say, you know what? Nobody else has this. Why would I get it?
Yeah.
But again, because I'm surrounded by people that are constantly challenging themselves and looking for new things, I'm in the same mode where I need to if they're doing it, I need to do it. I don't want to fall behind.
Yeah, you need to move fast and execute on it.
Exactly.
And I love the fact that you shared with me that it's like a $4,000 or something, $4,000, something like that. And it's like
crazy.
And it's it's skin in the game.
Exactly.
Skin in the game. It's like I used to do this thing, so I had and I still have this issue sometimes with procrastination, that I have 300 things that I want to do, but I need to focus on one. So I started doing this thing that I'll go to Starbucks. It's 2 blocks from here, and I'll go with my laptop, but I won't bring my charger with me, because I know that, the battery is running out. So I need to focus on these 2 things that I need to do. You know what? Not this one thing. And then I can, go on Reddit or whatever. But yeah, so it's like little tricks, little things that can help you focus on doing the one thing, getting your job done. And I think that I love the fact that, surround yourself with people better than you, but also making sure that you are better compared to the person you were last week, last month, last quarter, last year. So that idea of having that yearly review of this year, this 2019, what are the 3 things I'm proudest of? What are the 3 things that made me the happiest? What are the 3 things that I messed up, or opportunities that I have to learn? And just having that, sitting down a couple hours thinking about it, and you only have to do it once, and then guess what? You'll do it next year.
Exactly.
and you learn, right? And you get better every year. So
no, I agree. And the more strategic you can be with yourself, if you're the type of person who at the beginning of the years do the resolutions, I think a lot of people do that. You were recently talking about that in one of your Instagram accounts and one of your podcasts. But if you really when you write things down, you're more likely able, when you see things on paper, it's typically more likely that you'll do them than if you think about them, right? So what I do is at the beginning of every week, I write down on a piece of paper the things I need to complete by the end of the week. And, I'm an old school person. I will scratch them through. So I know I finished something. It gives me accomplishment, but it helps. I mean, you have to find ways that work for you.
Yeah.
And, it's the only way to stay ahead. And like you said, you're not competing with other people. Really, you're competing with yourself. Like, that's the only person you got to be better than, is yourself. And as long as you're learning something every day or every week or every month, that's how you know you're still growing and progressing. And if you feel that you're not, make sure that you make decisions today that will put you in a place where you will be growing every day, every week, or every month. And I think that's, to me, that's the best advice that anybody can get, because people get comfortable. You know, they get their first job, they're doing 3 things, they get comfortable, they're happy with their pay, but in reality, they're not growing. You know, and if they're not, they're in 10, 15 years, they're gonna be stuck in a place they don't enjoy, and their job opportunities out there might be limited because they never took a chance on learning other things. So I think it's anybody entering the workspace should always keep that in mind. You are a student for life. You should always be learning, no matter what.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Diego, thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think this is great. Thanks for having me. Always happy to be here in Silicon Valley, and hopefully we can continue to do some of these in the future. So.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. We can talk about the whole working out of your house 4 days a week, which blows my mind. The fact that you live in Chicago and you work in Silicon Valley 4 days a week, every week.
Yeah, people don't understand my lifestyle, and I know we talked about this in our other podcasts in Spanish, but there's a saying that my mom says, which is that when something is uncomfortable until you get used to it, right? So at the beginning of me working here in Silicon Valley and just traveling every week, taking a 5-hour flight every Monday and every Thursday, it was a little uncomfortable. You know, I was like, I don't know, how do I feel about this? But I've done it for so long now. It's been a long time since I've been doing this work that I'm basically used to it. Like, once you get used to something, it's not uncomfortable anymore. I'm on a flight and I can fall asleep within 5 minutes. Or I know how to work in a flight because I've done it so much. I'm in a hotel and I already have my places where I go to, like to study or to do work. So you can, no matter what in life, you can always adjust yourself to be happy in that situation. So it is tough. It's tougher than most lifestyles, that people that go to job 9 to 5 and they have time to go home and do normal things. I don't get to do that. But at the same time, it is very rewarding. There are other benefits that you get out of this life, which is you can, go to other places during the weekend, maybe visit family in other states. There's other things, other perks that you get from living this lifestyle.
Yeah, no, we'll do the life of a consultant for next episode. Awesome.
I know there's so much to talk about. So,
yeah.
But this is exciting. So thanks for having me.
No, thanks so much, Diego.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.